Hey, good morning. What is up? This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com is where you're going to get your next vehicle. Every single month, OGs and converts come to me for their Leafs content, also to get on the road at Norm at Oak Ridge Ford. Thank you so much for all of your support. It is Sunday, June 1st, 2025. Norm in London, Mike in Buffalo. You have the Medicine Hat Tigers and the London Knights facing off in the Memorial Cup final. Easton Cowan central to it all, leading that tournament in scoring. And wouldn't that be a triumphant finish for him in a junior career, coming to the Maple Leafs, not quite as a savior, but to help augment this group as it chases down its own championship. And then in the next couple of days, the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers will have a rematch of their Stanley Cup final from last year. Mike, I think it's the Oilers' time, and I know that quietly you believe that the dynasty that is the Florida Panthers will come to fruition in the next couple of weeks. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Norm. Well, I don't know who's going to win, and I predicted the Panthers in 6. I've got my orange and white pom-poms because the last team I want to see win is the friggin' Edmonton Oilers. I hate that team. I've hated them going back to the Gretzky era. They've won 5 Stanley Cups. That's enough for the next century. But they've got great players. They're a great team. They have a pretty good chance of winning. But I think the Panthers are a better team, a more playoff built for the playoff team, and plus the injury to Hyman, I think, is going to hurt the Oilers a lot. But just to start on the note that you just mentioned, the Memorial Cup, which is tonight between Medicine Hat and London. It's going to be a titanic struggle with Gavin McKenna with the Medicine Hat Tigers. Or it's Tigers, isn't it?
Yes.
Medicine Hat Tigers, yeah.
That's in Alberta, Mike.
Alberta. Oh, yes.
The western quadrant of Canada, which sits north of the United States.
You mean the province that's going to secede to the Union and join us as the 51st state? It's and I wrote about this yesterday. It's ironic how the sort of resumes of Easton Cowan and Mitch Marner both have won the Tilson. Both have won the OHL MVP. Both have won the Gretzky 99 MVP of the playoffs. The only thing that they really haven't matched, both were OHL first team All-Stars. The only thing that hasn't matched is the Memorial Cup that Marner won in 2016 and that Cowan might win against Medicine Hat. So if he does that, I think that the Leaf organization is wide open to the possibility of him making the team out of training camp, but they're not going to force it. They now have the option of if he's not ready, he can go down to the American Hockey League and play, and that might be the best thing for him. But, with the expected vacancy on the right side, I could see them say, give Cowan third line, third line opportunity, maybe second line opportunity, and then we'll see where it goes. But they're not going to plug him in on the top line with Austin Matthews, but they're going to give him a look at training camp, and we'll see what happens from there.
This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. Thanks for your support, guys. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. We've had a massive, 60 days or so with the Leafs getting into the playoffs and all of the talk, and then the series with the Panthers, the ups and downs. Lots of views, lots of subs, and people interacting with the content. We appreciate it very much. Things are going to die down a little bit over the summer months, but Mike and I are planning out content. So just make sure you're with us. Hit the notification bell, and you will be kept up to speed as to what we do next. Thank you very much for being here. Will Easton Cowan have a fervent parent who will complain about his destination next year, whether going to the American Hockey League or playing with the Maple Leafs? That remains to be seen. I hope not. And that might be the differentiation that you can make between him and the Mitch Marner camp all those years ago. I wanted to talk a little bit about Brad Treliving and his meeting with the media earlier this week. Mm-hmm. Look, he's the leader of the organization, right? He is the guy that has a little bit more power now with Brendan Shanahan leaving. And he's the guy who's kind of been at the helm for the last couple of years. Gets some credit for what he has done, has his detractors for some of the things that he's done or has not done. But the sense I got from him is a deep disappointment as to how the team that he is responsible for and partly constructed to get to a point where it could compete, or he thought it could compete against Florida, didn't in the end, and especially games 5 and 7. I think he even refrained from delving deep into how his true feelings were, based on the fact that he had advised his staff and his players to, cool down before making any certain decisions or going into how things are going to be consummated in the years to come. Did you get that same sense, Mike? I mean, he's a manager. He has to stand tall and be polite and, say the things that need to be said as a representative of an organization. But I got a feeling that this guy is really, really disappointed, and I'm kind of excited as to how he's going to react to it with the moves going forward.
Yeah, he clearly was disappointed. And I mean, I think it reflected sort of his analysis of the series, that he was most disappointed in retrospect with Game 3, where they led 3-1 and went to overtime and had chances, and then Marchand scores and Florida's back in the series. I mean, the performance in Game 5 and Game 7 is inexcusable. And the fact that Treliving, without being specific, talked about changing the DNA of the franchise. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand what he's talking about. He's talking about the core group, and he's talking about the ability to, take the cap space opened up by maybe John Tavares taking a team-friendly deal and Mitch Marner going to greener pastures to augment the roster to a team that shows up more in the playoffs. That's going to be tough to do, but I think he's up to the challenge, and I think he recognizes that the Shanahan plan was a failure. He was close with Brendan Shanahan. Brendan Shanahan hired him, and that's all fine and good. And that, Treliving is a good, solid, smart hockey man. Now, the question is whether he can hit home runs in free agency. He can sign players for lesser deals. He can negotiate good contracts. He can make the changes that need to be made. It can't simply just be, see you later, Mitch Marner. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. It's got to be replacing Marner with the right type of players. And that's going to be the challenge before and at the draft and after the draft when July 1st rolls around.
OG's converts, what say you? Do you think that Brad Treliving has a plan right now, and a contingency plan and an emergency plan dependent on how things go with Marner July 1st?
Well, I mean, we've already started the rumor campaign because everybody after the Treliving press conference was saying, Marner's gone. It's it's a fait accompli. He's gone.
Sure.
And then this weekend, all of a sudden, he said, well, Mitch Marner is open to returning to Toronto. Yeah, if he gets paid more than Austin Matthews. And this is a whole game between Darren Ferris and the Maple Leafs. The Leafs, the one thing, Treliving was very complimentary about Mitch Marner. He said he was a star, and all he said was, we'll see. We'll see means see you later. I mean, right. in my estimation, I don't think Marner wants to come back. I think the best thing that the Leafs can expect to get out of this situation is trading Marner's negotiating rights or trading him in a sign and trade. That's why I think Treliving is keeping things cordial and professional, because there's a benefit to the Leafs getting something out of the Marner situation. But do I think there's a chance that Mitch Marner is coming back? No, because I don't think they're willing. If Mitch Marner took $10 million, I'm not sure if the Leafs would opt for it. I think that they okay, you're talking about changing the DNA. Well, changing the DNA involves changing the core. And now I wrote this week, Norm, is changing one of that 5 good enough? Well, it may have to be, because I think they have to sign John Tavares back. And, there were people who watched the press conference who were taken aback by him saying not necessarily when it came to are you going to offer Marner or Tavares contracts. Pierre LeBrun clarified that with Treliving and said he just doesn't want to discuss negotiations in the media.
Well, there are various routes that he could take. The things could change. Wilfred Witzke, Tree already tried to trade Marner.
Yes, that's true. And at that point, I mean, they tried to trade him last summer, but there was no scenario that Darren Ferris and Mitch Marner were prepared to waive the no-move clause. They tried to trade him at the deadline where Mikko Rantanen was going to be traded by Carolina, and there were 3 or 4 teams, and Toronto was one of them, and Carolina asked for Marner. Marner said no, and in retrospect, I understand it. His wife was 8 months pregnant at the time, so he didn't want to go anywhere. Fine. But if he turns out in July and he signs with Carolina, the hate that a lot of people have for Matt Sundin, it will be exponential in terms of the hate for Mitch Marner if that happens.
Well, he's already slapped the organization in the face once before.
Right. And this is right. And Chris Daniels, apparently the Leafs asked for Shea Theodore, who was entering the last year of his contract. Vegas decided to sign him to an extension. Now the Leafs could get a William Karlsson. They could get, because if Vegas was in on Marner, they would have to open up cap space.
Right.
Could they trade Alex Pietrangelo? I don't know. I'm just saying they would have to trade something to Toronto or trade something away to open up space for Marner. Who knows whether that's the case? I mean, there'll probably be 10 teams in the bidding for Marner. I don't think Toronto is going to be one of them. I really don't. I think that the recognition is there that they need to change the mixture. They need to change the recipe, and they can't do that by continually bringing back the same group. Now, like I said, I think they're bringing Tavares back. I'm not going out on a limb here. Pierre LeBrun talked to Treliving, and not the comments that he made in the press conference, but the comments in the scrum afterward, it sounded like they're in on Tavares. So I expect Tavares to be back on a lesser deal. The only way he doesn't come back is if the Leafs are insulting and offer him $1 million, which I don't think they're going to do.
Listen, if they re-sign Tavares, and all signs point towards that happening, John Tavares automatically becomes a support player. He's no longer a member of the core anything, right? Thank you very much for being a quarter of the superstars that we had for the last 10 years. You're not in that realm anymore. Go ahead and put up superstar numbers if you want, but we're not going to pay you like a superstar, and you fully understand this. Mike, recently on TikTok, I put out the idea of a Mitch Marner sign and trade with the Maple Leafs, and we got roasted. Fans speaking without thinking, saying we're crazy to even come up with that idea, and others liked that concept but didn't believe it would ever happen. With this impending split, this divorce about to take shape, why on earth would Mitch Marner do anything that would benefit the Maple Leafs? And do you think he wants 8 years? Do you really do you believe that? And I mean, what's the percentage chance that there could be a sign and trade and a kumbaya, a couple hugs and kisses as this relationship comes to a close after all these years?
Well, I don't think he'd be doing it to help the Leafs out. I think he'd be doing it to help himself out because, okay, say it's Vegas, say it's Dallas, say it's Florida, where he'd be able to play with his former London Knights line mate, Matthew Tkachuk. Say it's one of those, okay, all those teams are capped out or close to being capped out. The only way that they can spread the AAV out, if he wants to go to a contender, is to spread it out over an 8th year and lower the AAV a little bit. Now, and also trade something off of their roster to open up cap space.
Right.
If they don't want to do that, fine. I mean, Zach Hyman decided he would rather take the 7-year deal with Edmonton than the 8-year deal with Toronto. That's all fine and good. I mean, that all he's doing is hurting himself. And if he wants to hurt the Leafs as he walks out the door, fine. I'm just saying, and yes, the cap is going up. But that doesn't mean that the player isn't going to want, especially if he's going to a no tax state in the US, like Florida or Nevada or Nashville is one but they're not close to being a contender. Every dollar counts. Now, if he goes to a team that's close to making the playoffs, like an Anaheim or a Utah, they can pay him, they could pay him 14 and a half, $15 million, and they wouldn't have to trade anything to the Leafs. They could do that. But the 8th year is always something that is helpful to the agent, to the team that's acquiring, and to the player. So if there's the possibility of that, I think it's about 20%, the possibility. But do I think it could happen? Yes. I don't think it's ridiculous. And those who are excoriating us for saying they don't know what they're talking about. They're clearly not knowledgeable about how things work in the NHL.
Right. Everybody's emotional right now, especially Maple Leafs fans. It's waning a little bit as we come to terms with the fact that the Maple Leafs, again, are just not good enough. We're talking about Mitch Marner almost in a past tense, knowing congratulations, but in a past tense, knowing that the end is coming, but he's still officially tied to the Maple Leafs. Looking forward, Mike, and we'll look forward a lot. And then once we get to July 1st, then we can immerse ourselves in a lot of the opportunity that the Leafs will find themselves in an attempt to make the organization better in the immediate. But are there 3 or 4 or 5 targets that you would put on the corkboard as go-get-ems for the Maple Leafs?
I see this. I don't like this free agent class. It's not very good.
But you still have to work with what you have, and I can tell you right now, Maple Leafs fans are not going to like September rolling around with just a bargain basement addition after losing a guy like Mitch Marner.
Right, but here's the thing. Wasting good money after bad on a free agent market is how you get in trouble.
Okay.
And if you overspend on a Brock Besser or Nick Ehlers, and you really don't want them, but you need to fill that hole, then Brad Treliving is not a good GM. What I think they're going to do, because the 2026 free agent class is one with Kaprizov and McDavid, if he doesn't sign on July 1st, and a few others, that's more attractive. Now, the question is, do those players get to July 1st? We'll find out. Well, nobody thought Mitch Marner was going to get to July 1st, and he is. So, and the cap going up may affect those players being willing to sign new deals.
So these things considered, Mike, who would the Maple Leafs target? Who would they look at to make the group a little bit better without blowing their brains out financially, setting themselves up to be a player in 2026?
I think the target, if he gets to July 1st, is Sam Bennett. But will he get to July 1st? I mean, Florida has the same advantage as Toronto. They could offer him the 8th year. They're a no-tax state. John Shannon said last week, and John Shannon is as tied in as anybody. He said, he was on a Vancouver radio station and or podcast, and he was asked. They were asking him about Vancouver and Sam Bennett. He said, "Don't bother." Says he's going one of 2 places. He is going back to Florida, or he's going home. He's signing with Toronto. Now, tax implications, all those other things. The Leafs can only offer him a 7-year deal. Spike, I don't know about that. This is not David Clarkson. This is not an overpriced winger. This is a guy who plays center. This is a guy who plays playoff hockey. This is a guy that Treliving knows from Calgary. And
Can they get him for digestible money?
No, you have to pay him. You're going to have to probably pay him, I would say, 9. And he's a 20 to 25 goal scorer. But you're signing him for when? The playoffs, where he thrives.
2 things, Mike. 2 things. Regardless of the money, going after this guy, are they risking investing in a player with maybe too much mileage on him, especially over the last several years, and spending that kind of money on a player who's going to either be good for you or his best days are behind him? And that's the risk you take with any free agent signing. How does it set them up to, again, be integral to what happens with cash to spend in the summer of 2026?
Well, I let's just say this. I think that the marching orders of Treliving this time around are to be different rather than be the same. And they have been the same. You know, you've addressed every other thing, the goaltending, the general manager, the coach, the secondary players, even the defense. It's the core that has been the same and the core that has failed. Right. And 7.5 will not make it. No way, no how. But Alan in the chat was like, sign Marner, trade Nylander and Kampf, and Yardencroak, try to trade Riley.
Right. That sounds like you could do that with a snap of the fingers.
Yeah, okay, Alan. As Brad Treliving said in his press conference, Mitch has a say in this. And I don't know for sure, but the signs are there that Mitch doesn't want to sign in Toronto unless he gets paid more than Austin Matthews. And then I don't know whether Toronto wants to sign him at that. You know, trade Nylander, he's got a no-move clause. Who's going to score goals if they, you know, I mean, Marner's not a scorer. He's a 30-goal scorer, but not a, you know, Nylander was the second highest goal scorer in the NHL this year.
Mike, those are Allen's 2 cents. Let's not get derailed.
No. But I'm just
a fantastical idea that nobody wants.
I'm just bringing it back to reality here.
Right.
Now, the three things that he says: Kampf and Yardencroak. Elliot Friedman said on his 32 Thoughts podcast that the belief is that Treliving is going to use the buyout option. I would say more than likely it's going to be on Kampf because he's got 2 years left at $2.4 million. The problem is that a sizable chunk of those deals are signing bonus. So there's not going to be a great deal of cap relief when it comes to it. Maybe they can sucker Kyle Dubas or Sheldon Keefe to trade for Kampf because he was useful for the Leafs under their auspices. Kyle Yarncroke's got a year left at $2.1 million. I think he's still useful. If they can trade him, fine. If they can't trade him, fine. The buyout is almost a definite on Ryan Reeves because Ryan Reeves has no signing bonus and they get almost $1 million in cap space if they buy him out. So see you later, number 75. Mm-hmm. The try to trade Riley. Pierre LeBrun reported this. Riley is not waiving his no move. Gee, folks, where did you hear that? It's like, I'm sorry. When they get a no move, unless they want to move,
right,
they're not moving. And he doesn't want to leave. And he's still got something. He's still got something to prove. He wants to win in Toronto. And they played better when he was playing with Brandon Carlo. He doesn't want to go. So the question that I asked in my blog, Norm, was, is one player enough to change the DNA? They're going to find out. Now, the thing is, Tavares will be at $5 million. And you lose the almost $11 million of Marner. That's $16 million. And if you buy out and you move out some other players, you could have $22, $23 million in cap space.
Right.
That's a lot to work with.
Maybe the smart thing to do is just make minor moves, minor tweaks, begin to remove the DNA that has to be removed. Have Nylander, Matthews carry the day offensively. Obviously, you re-sign Nyes and you make do with what you have. A couple of goaltenders who both want to be number one. See what you can do next season and set yourself up for greater opportunity in 2026. Maybe that's the prudent thing to do. That's the smart thing to do when you're looking at the long-term view. But fans want results yesterday, and they're going to want results this coming season. They're going to want another 100-point campaign from the team that they love and loathe so dearly. So Brad Treliving has his work cut out for him. And again, just going back to his press conference, you can sense it's just a real disappointment that is deeply rooted in this guy. And I mean, that's a good thing. However, the last thing you want is the head of the organization who has more powers now to make moves emotionally instead of economically and rationally, right?
I think there's a realization on the part of Treliving that this doesn't work.
Right.
I think he was prevented by Brendan Shanahan from the get-go from exploring other options. Remember, it was 5 weeks before Mitch Marner's no move clause that Treliving was hired. More than likely, he was told, we're going to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was why I was advocating trading Nylander before he signed the 8-year deal, because you had to move one of them, and now you move none of them, and now you're going to lose one of them for nothing. Except, maybe you get some draft picks, or maybe you get a player in a sign and trade. But it's very possible. The overwhelming odds are they're going to lose Mitch Marner for nothing other than cap space. And yes, cap space is valuable, but you could have gotten tangible assets back. And that is the failure of this organization 2 years ago. They pushed it down the road, and now in terms of getting assets back, they're screwed.
One bit of certainty out of the Treliving press conference: the Leafs and Nyes are going to come together on a big contract. He feels the kid deserves it, wants to be part of the organization, and believes he'll be integral to its success going forward. And that's a no-brainer, obviously.
Get him signed for as long as you can, for as little as you can. That's part of the negotiating process. If you have to pay him $7.5 to $8 million, which is a little more than some comparable forwards on an 8-year deal, do it. I mean, if you have to give him 1 year less and go 7 years, so he becomes an unrestricted free agent at 29, do it. The one thing you can't do is do the same damn thing that you did with Matthews and Marner and Nylander, which is the shorter term bridge deal. Even if it's 5 years or 4 years or 6 years, you can't. If you're paying the guy, get the max.
Right.
You have to.
We have a new guy signing him up, and he represents an organization that has made those mistakes. So the expectation is he'll sign him the right way and won't make those mistakes. But that remains to be seen. Look, Florida Oilers in the final for the second straight year. I'm sure, Mike, you would like the Maple Leafs to evolve into a team that more resembles Florida, though based on the personnel, the Leafs are more akin to the kinds of play that we see from the Oilers, with the some shortcomings throughout the lineup with the top heavy scorers. Goaltending can be iffy. So with that in mind, if you would like, with the DNA being split up and changed and eradicated over the next month with this Maple Leaf group, and positive change potentially taking place over the years to come, why the hell not just dump the money into Sam Bennett? Because he represents he comes from an organization that you'd like the Maple Leafs to evolve into. Instead of get to 2026, if Connor McDavid's available, I mean, he's the best player on earth and might be one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest when it's all said and done. But he represents more of what you don't like as opposed to what you like. Last word to you.
Well, there's no guarantee. We'll find out on July 1st, because July 1st will be the first day that Connor McDavid can sign an extension. And if he signs an extension on July 1st, then the dream of 97 in blue and white is over with.
And it might be a good thing.
Well, I mean, it would leave no doubt. It's not like Stamkos, where it got strung out until like a week before free agency.
Right.
And then the Leafs were left holding the bag. Now, the next year they got Tavares, but you get the point. The point is, you can hope and pray all you want, but if the guy decides not to come, if he holds out going into the season, then you might think that there's a chance.
Right.
But on July 1st, he very well may be the highest paid player in the NHL and signs an 8-year deal to stay in Edmonton. And at that point, the Leafs need to make the decision of whether they're going to pay a guy like Sam Bennett 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5, 10 million, whatever it takes. The chances of him coming here, I mean, he may sign with Florida before then. And then the Leafs are basically looking at, Nick Ehlers or Brock Besser, or, piecing together 2 or 3 players. I mean,
he would come from a team that is a band of brothers that may have just won its second Stanley Cup to join a hometown team with a bunch of unbelievable talent. But as he's seen over the last several seasons, just ain't up to par when it comes to rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty when it counts the most.
This is his chance to make the big money.
Right.
Especially if he wins a second straight Stanley Cup. This is his last chance. He's 20, 28 or 29 years old. This is his last chance to hit it big. In Florida, he's going to have to take, because of state tax, he can take less. But he's going to have to, and the cap is going up. Right. But in Florida, they have, he's not going to make more than Barkov. He's not going to make more than Kachuk. He's not going to make more than Reinhardt. He would have to slot in.
Right.
And if he wants to make more money, he's probably going to do that coming home.
Mm-hmm. How many more years do you think Florida has after this one to stay as competitive as they have been?
I mean, they don't really have any prospects coming through the pipeline. They're, but they have.
So they're expending it. Go for it.
Right, but they have most of that core group locked up long term.
Right.
They acquired a defenseman in Seth Jones, who's locked up long term.
Right.
Bobrovsky has one more year left in his contract.
Right.
But he's 37 years old. They may re-sign Marchand. They could go another couple years. Very possible.
Right. Yeah, but that Atlantic division's going to get better too, right? The Leafs will be in the mix. Tampa will be in the mix. Ottawa's a coming. Montreal's a coming. Look the hell out. OGs and converts, like the content, subscribe to the channel. We really do appreciate you being here. And even if the amount of shows we do is limited over the next few months compared to what you've been a part of over the last several months, stick with us because season 8 is on the horizon. And in the world of the Maple Leafs, there's always news. There's always something to talk about. And July 1st should be a very interesting, if not a lot of fun. Mike, what's happening at Hockey Hot Stove?
Well, we've reached 3,200 subscribers in our first month. Numbers are going up. I recommend everybody go to and register and follow. I write daily on the Leafs, and there's going to be a lot of news between now and the draft. The draft combine is next week in Buffalo, and there should be a lot of news coming out of the Leafs between then and the draft in Los Angeles.
Be nice to see the London Knights win the Memorial Cup, another one. Easton Cowan potentially take the MVP of that tournament. Would put him on a real high coming into a professional career that could be amazing. I'd love to see him start with the Maple Leafs, Mike, and I honestly think that's where he is going to be at the end of the day. We will talk before the Panthers and Oilers wrap up the NHL season. How does the Stanley Cup final come together?
Panthers in 6. I think the Panthers will.
Panthers in 6. Panthers in 6. Panthers in 6. Panthers in 6. They are just an absolutely phenomenal team. But again, it's the DNA. It's the DNA they have and the DNA the Maple Leafs just don't have. How do you get that DNA? Honestly, it doesn't happen with 1 or 2 moves, or it doesn't happen over a season. It happens over a long period of time. And, I hope with what the Maple Leafs have, via some changes and some puck luck potentially over the years, they'll be able to find a way to win a Stanley Cup before you and I both end up 6 feet under, Mike. And that's kind of why we produce this content, to expend the anguish and to be here potentially for when it all comes together. Mr. A, thanks so much. OG's Converts, we appreciate you being here. For Mike Augello in Cheektowaga, New York, I'm Norman James in London, Ontario. The Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford is out.